Last time on Star Trek The Next Generation.
I brought O'Brien last week. He's had a great time. He got everyone whiskey. But no, one of the bridge crew wants to come down. One who I will point out doesn't have a functioning understanding of the emotion of humour, right? Suddenly he's top billing. Well, I'm just saying, she didn't look 11. Right?
Right.
Okay. So that's not on me.
I've ended up with 148 dildos. I don't know, man. What's the opposite of the French Revolution?
And now, the conclusion.
Podcasts. A Frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast Captain Slog. Its ongoing mission: to explore strange new episodes, to seek out new jokes and new references, to split infinitives that no one has split before. Captain Slog, Stardate 47. These are the continued voyages of Lieutenants Eddie Edwards and Mr. Mark Bench as we trek our way through all of Star Trek. How you been, Mark? What you been up to?
So we started recording this episode a little bit late, a few minutes late, because I was watching a video on YouTube about a guy taking staples, like your standard stationary staples, and turning it and forging it into like a blade, right? Calling it Staples Damascus steel, right? Now with a sale like that and a video that's been on YouTube for days with millions of hits, I'm like, I am going to learn something here. This is going to be incredible. Now, Eddie, I wanted to tune out pretty quickly, but then I thought, no, maybe this is going somewhere. I don't know how many times I'm going to have to say it on this podcast, Eddie. I am not a blacksmith. So I assumed when I read this guy's taking staples and turning it into a blade, I'm like, that's some ingenuity. But the first thing he does, he gets the staples, he takes them out of the box, he arranges them into a sort of nice little stable, almost like circle of staples, like you used to do with like Quavers or you know when you make those Pringles circuits. I've never done it. I'm usually too busy eating them, but I've seen it on the internet. You make the Pringles circles and they all interlock in.
Yeah, I don't doubt that can be done, but by somebody with more self-control around Pringles than I have.
Exactly. I've seen it online. But the first thing he does, he gets these little staple bars, and then he immediately puts it into like a tiny little metal box, which he fills up with some sort of powder that he doesn't explain. So how am I to know that powder isn't magic sword-making powder? In which case, I'm just watching a man making a regular knife.
He's just putting in powdered steel.
So I'm sitting there alone on my couch. I'm watching this video. I'm like, by that point, I'm 2 minutes in. I'm already invested in this 9-minute video. I'm like, what's going on here? And this is how he gets you. He starts doing. I assume it's a he. You don't see his face. He had quite manly hands, so I'm going to take a jump on that one. Then he starts doing all the tools and things and all the automatic hammer shit coming down, and I'm like, well, I'm definitely going to watch this. But what you've done is you've got me watching a video just about a clearly regular everyday thing that blacksmiths do, and you've made a promise about it being made out of staples, and I just don't believe you. And now YouTube doesn't have the dislike button, so I can't really let this man know how I feel, other than going in the comments and just shouting some racial abuse at him. That's the world we live in now.
Yeah, YouTube brought that on themselves.
Yeah.
By getting rid of the dislike button. All that's left is racial epitaphs. But I'm with you. If somebody says, I'm going to make a knife out of staples, I want this to be something I could construct conceivably at a standard video game crafting bench that I expect to be all over the place come the zombie apocalypse. Yeah. But if you're going to just like go, I'm not going to find a blacksmithing shop. Not frequently. Not enough to make weapons. So no.
And get this, man. About halfway through the video, he's made the little, what I assume are Damascus steel rods, right? And then he boils a kettle, and I'm like, oh, a kettle's boiling. This is a new thing that's happening. And then he gets some leaves, and then he puts these leaves in a little glass teapot, and I'm like, what's this got to do with steel making? Is this guy just making himself a fucking cuppa, right? Pours the water in the leaves, and just pours himself a cup of tea and drinks it. 45 seconds of your video that you promised me was a video about making a knife out of staples, I've just spent watching you make yourself a fucking brew.
Yeah,
What is this, mate?
I was hoping that was going to be some sort of Japanese ceremonial thing where like, you have to pour the tea water onto the blade, and it's imbued with the spirit of your ancestors.
Yeah. As the writer Kevin Smith once said, brevity is the soul of wit.
Yeah. It was also him who said if you establish in Act 1 that there is a teapot, in Act 3 that teapot should be used to make a sword.
He named it Chekhov's gun after an episode of Star Trek.
All right.
So how have you been?
I'm alright. I've been replaying The Witness. If you've ever played that, it's lovely. It's kind of like a modern Myst if the puzzles weren't shit. Right. You're on an island. It looks beautiful, really beautiful game, and you go around to these little panels that have mazes on them, and you've got to solve mazes. And it's like, it starts off just, what's the quickest way through? And then it's, what's the quickest way through? What's getting all the dots? And you can't go back on yourself. You've got a line. And then it's like, collect it. You've got to cut these areas, like certain shapes off from certain other shapes. So it gets more complicated iterating on the idea. And it's been about 2-3 years since, no, maybe 4 years since I last played it. So I've forgotten all the puzzles now. And I never finished it because the bloke who made it reckons only about 2% of people who play it will actually finish it because there's so many hidden puzzles in it. So I decided to go back and feel intellectually inferior by not being able to complete The Witness again.
Well, that sounds complicated. I've been playing the new Ghostbusters game in which you bust ghosts.
Is there a new Ghostbusters game? I was unaware of this.
It's actually pretty mint. It's in that sort of fashionable video game style that the kids have now. Where it's like 4 players versus 1 player, and 1 player is the ghost. And when I found this out, I was like, why on earth would I ever want to play as the ghost? It's literally been my dream to bust ghosts my entire life. Why would I ever want to be the one who is themselves busted? But I'll tell you what, man, playing as the ghost is great.
This
so
is
much
like
fun.
It's got the opposite of the Friday. Was it the Friday the 13th one where one person played as Jason? And then a group of you played as survivors, and apparently that had real problems with people just logging off immediately. They weren't playing Jason, but this is like whereas Ghostbusters is like, no, I want to play the weaker thing with a Ghostbuster backpack.
Well, there is, exactly. There is a thing because after the first day I played it, because I've got a group of mates that I play it with, and there's 4 of us, so that works out. 4 white guys though, we. So the first day we played it, there wasn't obviously that many players. No, everyone was kind of getting used to it. But we noticed that as the Ghostbusters, if the ghost was played by the AI, we could bust it pretty easily. But if it was played by a player, then it was actually really difficult to do. So we were like, well, the ghost has to get nerfed. And then we looked at all the chat, and it was 50-50 on the ghost has to get nerfed and the Ghostbusters have to get nerfed, which to me tells me that that's quite a balanced game.
Yeah.
But do you know what's weird? Is I believe it's from the same people who made the Friday the 13th game, and upon release, I think one of the voice actors was on a podcast, and someone asked them like, Ghostbusters seems to be shaping up to be pretty balanced and good. Like, why has that happened here when the Friday the 13th game was just a big mess? And apparently he said that he was talking to the developers about it, and the developers basically said, well, Sony just gave us the rights and then just left us alone so we could actually make a proper functioning game. Whereas the makers of Friday the 13th were like, no, they were really interfering. But Sony,
I can imagine they have very specific rules about, like, Jason has to be A, B, C, D, and it's like Yeah, because I know that apparently the Evil Dead one is great, and they were like left alone, like it, and that's to the point where they've gone. We have no respect for continuity. There could be like 4 people playing as Ash at any one time, and if you're an Evil Dead fan, you've never cared about the continuity of the greater franchise. It doesn't matter. I want to see a man with a chainsaw hand killing Deadites. That's all I want. It doesn't matter how you make that happen.
Yeah.
So
because that middle Evil Dead movie that they released in 2013, I mean, it's fine. But it doesn't have a man with a chainsaw for a hand killing monsters. So why am I'm not interested.
I love that the only studio note they've ever got is like that they've ever listened to was Sam Raimi got a studio note after they filmed about half of the third like Army of Darkness, where they just went, in the last act you have Ash hiding in a wardrobe and pissing himself, and we think it makes him too unlikable. Could you make him somewhat heroic, please? And then Sam Raimi was like, okay, I'll let him be the hero, but the unleashing of the evil has got to also be largely his fault.
Yeah, there's a really good quote from Sam Raimi. I think it was during the production of Ash vs Evil Dead, where an interviewer asked him, what do you think is appealing about Ash? And he said, well, the thing that's appealing about Ash is that he's not really an everyman. It's more that he is good at one specific thing, and that one specific thing happens to be killing Deadites. So if we drop him into a universe where there are Deadites for him to kill, no matter how obnoxious he is as a character, you're going to get to quite like him.
I love if you want a joy, one of my great joys in life is watch the Evil Dead 2 with director's commentary. Because on the Evil Dead 2, there is one of my favourite bits of commentary. It's right at the opening, but if you haven't seen Evil Dead 2, it starts with kind of a retread of Evil Dead 1 because there were some rights issues and they didn't have the rights to the first movie, so they refilmed that bit as sort of a truncated opening for the second one. On the commentary, they're talking about the fact they had to do that. And there's been a lot of discussion about whether or not Ash is stupid enough to go to the same cabin twice, even though the first time he nearly got murdered by the Evil Dead. And the answer to that question is yes, but that's not what happened.
Speaking of things that have clips from other things in it.
So yeah,
I didn't hate this episode. I think there have been worse episodes.
Okay, so if you, to just progress it, I hesitate to say it's a clip show because it spends more time on like the wraparound for establishment of a clip show than necessary. But it's a cross between a clip show and a bottle episode. This episode exists entirely because the money ran out.
Yeah, and so, I think that's a common thing back in. If you're a Gen Zer listening to this, probably not Gen Z. If you're a Gen Alpha listening to this, first of all, get back to school. Second of all, if you're not aware, because they don't really have to do them anymore. Clip shows, as much as people complain about them, clip shows used to be fairly useful. Especially with shows in the 80s and the 90s where home media maybe wasn't as available. Certainly, you couldn't stream it as you can now. You couldn't even really watch it on the internet in any way, shape, or form. You had to go out and buy the VHS copies. So every now and again, a clip show would be good because it could fill you in on things that you might have missed if you jumped on at a later date. This has none of that. But here's something I was talking to Laura about because we watched Clerks 3 the other day. And Clerks 3 is essentially a series of callbacks to Clerks 1 designed to make grown men cry. Now, there's a bit in Clerks 3 where they where they go into the freezer at the back of the quick stop, and I said, if they get, because I kept pausing it to basically show off my knowledge of Kevin Smith's entire life, and that's why she loves me. But I was like, if they get locked in this freezer, this is the deepest cut in this whole thing because, and this is
that's. Yeah, it's because I think I know what you're gonna reference.
Yeah, so there was a little known Clerks the animated series released in the 90s, which is very good. It's on DVD. There's only 6 episodes, but they done the first episode as like a kind of adventure. It's good. It's great. Right? It's a standard animated comedy show, but then a genius move suggested by Paul Dini, the man who created Batman the Animated Series, said, "Why don't you just make episode 2 a clip show of episode 1?" And it really works.
It's an entire episode devoted to we are doing one joke and we are going to hammer it over and over again because it's a really funny joke. Yeah. So the story with this episode goes, I looked into the production of it. So they were asked to do a bottle episode that would like save money. Normally they took 7 days to film an episode of Star Trek Next Generation. This they wanted to do for the the network asked them to do 5 days. They ended up having 3. And that's when they added in the aspects of making it a clip. The director has never seen the episode. He filmed. There were 3 days of filming, and 2 days of that were entirely on the sickbay set.
And it seems like they couldn't even afford Picard. It's like he showed up for 15 minutes on his way to do something else.
Yeah, I think there was literally a thing about like keeping the cast as minimal as possible. But here's the thing, Mark. I looked into it to find out why they didn't have any money left, and and it annoys me so much because, I agree, they didn't have any money left because they blew it all on Elementary, My Dear Data, and Q-Who. Like that's the 2 best episodes. Yeah.
Fair enough.
But equally, I do look at a lot of season 2 and go, we didn't need that episode.
Yeah. I do like as well that this was a clip show. It's almost like they could see the future, because before I'd really sat down to start watching Next Gen, I would ask people about it, and the advice I would always get would be just start at season 3. And it's as if they've made a clip show episode at the end of season 2 to be like, this is why you should start at season 3, because this is a clip show that only references bad episodes.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong, there's 2 or 3 fuck planets in there, but of course that's what Riker remembers.
Of the 46 previous episodes, they choose clips from 17 of them, and they include the racist episode and the sexist episode.
Yeah.
And also, they're supposed to be Riker's memories, but there are certain clips of things Riker couldn't possibly have remembering, like stuff that he didn't see, unless assuming he didn't later then watch the episode back on the replays after the episode's finished. Oh, and also there's a clip from Wrath of Khan.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was bizarre.
So apparently Riker remembers watching Wrath of Khan.
As we all would on our deathbed.
Yeah. It's like I'm going to be lying there on my deathbed, and he regrets. We should watch Wrath of Khan more.
just God, give me 123 minutes. I'll skip the credits. So I didn't look at all into the production of this episode. Oh, my screen's just gone off. Oh, it's back. I didn't look at all into the production of this episode, but do you know what the jungle set was?
No, I was curious because I was assuming if you're going to trying to save budget, you got a 3-day thing that would have been a pre-existing set.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have built unless they already had all of like the elements and could quickly throw it together.
I reckon it's a theme park ride.
Really?
I reckon it might be like the background of a theme park ride or something.
I think it might be the background of the set they use for Worf's fighting program.
Yeah.
Like, it could be some bits of that filmed from a different angle. So maybe. It's like...
Where did they film it? They filmed it in Burbank, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they could easily pop off to Universal Studios or I don't think Disney would have let them, but yeah, I think you're probably right. I think that was just a random set they had knocking about that they just didn't visit a whole lot this season.
Yeah. So, like, the cast-wise, like you said, it's like they didn't have Picard money. Or could they? Yeah, I think they only paid him Patrick Stewart for one day. So it's Geordie Riker, Chief O'Brien, Deanna Troi, one extra.
Yep.
Data thing, and the last ever appearance of Dr. Pulaski. She lasted. I checked this out beforehand. I did a bit of research. The season she was on was 238 days. Was her tenure on board the Enterprise, which is equivalent to 5.28 Liz Trusses. And I don't yet know how many Sunaks, but I'm guessing more than 2.
I am. Oh fuck yeah. O'Brien watch. I don't. So Pulaski, I've actually come to quite like Pulaski over the latter half of the season. But this really took me out because first of all, the first thing she does is approach the transporter with a look on her face. Right now, obviously, I know Pulaski is frightened of transporters, but don't be making those faces approaching the fucking platform as if O'Brien doesn't know what he's doing, right?
Yeah.
And it just made me feel like, you know, the people who clap when the plane lands. I reckon Pulaski claps when she rematerializes.
She's deliberately snarky towards like O'Brien, who's clearly trying to put her at ease.
Yeah,
with a little bit of transport or comedy. It's like, don't take it out on O'Brien.
Yeah.
Don't, like, if you're worried that your molecules are going to get spread all over the cosmos and you're going to be dead, then don't piss off the man who can do that.
Yeah, he knows what buttons to press. He's done it before.
He can make it look like an accident.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. When he beams out a hooker, she comes out dead.
Oh, but yeah, I do like it's like the whole episode is basically Riker going, "Oh, my leg." That's it. He trips on a vine and it like stabs him. It is so clear that they had no money for this episode, because there's a lot of like, let's explain in depth Riker's situation so that we only have to set up 2 locked off camera shots and do the like back and forth explaining all the medical like stuff, and then it's Riker has like, if he's having positive dreams, then that will be good for the thing that's trying to kill him, but if he's having bad dreams, then it's bad for the thing that's going to try and kill him, because we don't want to show just Riker's pleasant moments, because that's an even worse clip show.
Yeah.
So
here's the time he got beat up by an old guy.
Yeah. I wouldn't have done season 1.
Yeah,
I would have had that as a rule. I would have all Riker must be bearded in all clips from this episode.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, so a little bit of thing. This is like the only clip show in the history of Star Trek. Because I'd looked into it, and they're like, on the memory alpha, they've got like 5 things they say could technically count as a clip show. And one of them is like some flashbacks in the finale of Deep Space Nine. That doesn't count. That's fine. And then they tried to say the episodes where they flash back to the unaired pilot of the original series. But it never aired. That doesn't count as a clip. Yeah.
And the events of that episode are pertinent to the events. The events of the pilot are pertinent to the events of that episode.
Yeah.
So it's not a clip show.
No, it's not. They apparently they got approached in season 4 again. Like Paramount came to them and was like, "You've gone over budget. You have to make a clip show." Again, and they were so angry about how this show turned out. This episode, they were like, "No." So they came up with like a bottle episode that was like as cheap to produce as a clip show would be. But yeah, this is basically this. Be thankful this episode exists, because it means that no other clip shows ever be attempted.
If they really wanted to save money, what they should have done is just done an episode entirely from the perspective of Geordi. through his visor with stunt doubles. Because that effect isn't expensive.
Yeah, where the only bad guy they run into is they have like 20 different Ferengi baddies, but they're all played by Armin Shimmerin,
Yep.
so you're saving money there.
Yeah, here's a question. How do they attach the pouches to the uniforms?
I don't know. I assume there's a belt.
But it's a one piece, but you can't really see a belt. And it's like, well, I don't imagine they would have went out of their way to make that look good in future HD when they're having things like there's a bit in this episode where Riker gets a needle like injected into his head, and it's obviously one of those effects where the needle is on a spring and it springs back into itself. And I wrote down, I bet that looked great in standard definition, but it doesn't in HD. So are there different uniforms with like different pouches on them? If anyone knows the answers to this question, please put it in the comments.
Yeah, if there's, I could,
or underneath
the
your
idea-
5-star review.
Because if it's a one piece,
Yeah.
are they changing? Like, is it? Oh, we're going to do an away mission. Oh, am I going to need a pocket? So the Star Trek uniforms, are they designed in the future? Like they decided everybody's going to wear the same sort of stuff. Basically, it's all going to wear the same, and then they decided, well, making it as uniform as possible. Women don't have pockets, so no one has pockets. Instead of
That's the
giving
way to
everybody pockets.
Yeah.
Speaking of uniforms, this is their last appearance. This is the last appearance of the Type A uniform.
Yeah. One man.
These these get the one piece get thrown out because they were doing in Patrick Stewart's back.
Yeah.
He was getting screwed in by the compression, so they're a woolen two piece going forward. I think that might give you a view onto how much I have to say about this episode.
I have nothing, and it's not like I have nothing to say about it because it's a clip show. Because I have things to say about clip shows. Do you know what I mean? Some people put a lot of effort into their clip shows. I was talking to my WhatsApp group today, and I said, because I was just for lunch, I was like, oh, let's stick on an episode of The Simpsons, and Bart the Comet was next on my Disney Plus, like my Disney Plus app, which for me is essentially just The Simpsons app. The Simpsons series 3 through 8 app, right? So I was like, oh, what's next? I haven't watched it for a couple of weeks. It was Bart the Comet, and I'm like, is this one good? And then I kind of thought about it for a second. I'm like, no, of course it's good. It's got some great jokes in it. It's got a really, really dark Principal Skinner joke, which is really good, which I think should be up there with steamed hams, and they just can't get the spices right. But I texted my WhatsApp group, and I was like, can you think of any legit shit episodes between, let's say, seasons 3 and 9? Or seasons 4 and 9, because season 3 they're still kind of finding their feet a little bit. But yeah, there's not, even the clip shows have some all-timer jokes in them, like the 138 episode Spectacular, when it goes to commercial, and it's two silhouettes, and it says, "Can you name the two popular characters who died during an episode or something?" And then it comes back and it's like, if you said Bleeding James Murphy and Dr. Marvin Monroe, you're wrong. They were never popular. or the other one, which is it goes to commercial and it's like, what does it say on the scanner when Maggie goes through, and it comes back and it says NRA forever. Just one of the many wild right-wing statements that Matt Groening likes to insert into every episode.
One of my favorite. It's a lot later on Simpsons episodes is when they wrote Matt Groening as a character. He appears in the episode, and one of them is, "If you see me in public, tug on my beard. It has magic powers. I'm always pleased to have it happen." Which is clear that I love that that's in there, because it's just cause the level of like, let's write a joke that makes everybody go up and annoy Matt when they see him in public, that Matt will have to read because it's objectively hilarious.
Yeah, it's just it was so lazy.
Well, the thing is, like, you're right though. Like, a good clip show, like you can do good things with it, but they chose some of the worst episodes to like. I think it's they chose the racist episode is in. It turns up up the long ladder, the anti-Irish episode is. Why these episodes? Why not? Why there is not a single clip that they show from Q Who or Elementary My Dear Data, which are the two episodes they massively overspent on.
Yeah.
Which apparently didn't. Like Riker went over to a Borg cube. So that's a bad memory. Surely
Yeah, he was probably pretty scared. Remember when he's seen all those fucked up babies? That's the opposite of arousal, isn't it?
Also, sadness isn't the opposite of happiness. That's a very limited understanding of how emotions work. You can be happy and sad at the same time.
Yeah, the opposite of any emotion is apathy.
Yeah.
So they should have what they should have done to solve that, which I think would have made this an incredible episode, is just be like, oh my god, we need them to feel real apathy. I know. Get Commander Data down here. And what we'll do, right, is we'll ask a replicator to make 2 hats with folded up bits of paper in them with different subjects, and then we'll pull 2 subjects out, and we'll say to Data, no, what we'll do is we'll take 4 out, right, and we'll take 3 out, and we'll show them up to Data, and we'll say, Data, this is to this, as this is to, and then just fucking let them go. And just let Riker watch. That'll kill any brain virus.
I think you've made a mistake by having Data do scenes from a hat when you could have had him do the hoedown. The thing is, I'd say, like, okay, positives about this episode. Riker's sense of humour is quite good.
Yeah.
Like, he stays quite, like, jovial. That's it. It's for a season finale as well, Mark. Like,
they've really fucked up their season finales so far.
Yeah, they haven't even had the idea of like, oh, maybe we should do a cliffhanger, so that people would get annoyed if we didn't get another series, rather than being like, as a Star Trek fan, I'm contractually obligated to watch the next series of whatever shite you make.
To be fair, they do bring it back. Like, in the very next season, we get a culturally historic fucking cliffhanger.
Yeah,
So-
no, they do something absolutely incredible. But not Mark. I've seen a trailer for Picard season 3.
Yeah, so have I.
Did you see Moriarty?
Yeah. Why is that happening? I mean,
because he's the only recurring villain that they have who isn't an omnipotent super being or that one Borg that's a bit gammy.
because I haven't seen the later Moriarty episodes, but I know I can only imagine there's some sort of closure.
I don't think there is. And how he gets out is so bad. It's so stupid. Like, Geordie is like running diagnostics on checking that the holodeck is working properly. So he's just pumping out every character from the memory log to check that it's working properly, and didn't forget and forgets to like not do it with Moriarty.
It would have been better if because it's in like season 7 or something. Because the reason I think we discussed in the episode is that they found out they didn't actually have the rights to use Moriarty. But it would have been good if he's doing that and he's like, right, here's my whatever, my Milk of Magnesia fantasy, boop, and there's her, and then there's his Asian fantasy, and there's all of Geordie's other fantasies, and he's like, yeah, this is pretty good, and then he presses a button and Moriarty appears. He should have just been like, oh fuck, that's right, we were supposed to fix this. Remember that time we created sentient life? Oh. Remember that time we had to send quite a strongly worded feedback to Holodeck Incorporated?
Do you know about the legal issues that Netflix are having with their Enola Holmes movies?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
But yeah, so if you were listening and you're aware of this, Henry Cavill plays Sherlock, and he's quite nice and not a dismissive misogynist. And the estate of Arthur Conan Doyle are arguing that if he's not a misogynist, he's clearly Holmes in later life,
Yep.
which is the last 3 books that are still covered by copyright. So look forward to the next Enola Holmes movie, in which, for no reason whatsoever, Sherlock punches a woman.
Yeah. Anyway, fuck this episode. Did you finish Rings of Power?
I didn't start Rings of Power.
I really quite like Rings of Power.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I'm interested. And by the way, quick point, I want to throw this out there. Lenny Henry is the most accurate Hobbit that we've ever got. There's
They're all supposed to have Jamaican accents.
no, right.
To be fair to him, and this is something I learned from Boy Boy, there is a theory that the Jamaican accent as we know it evolved from, I can't remember if it's just the Irish or if it's the Irish and the Scots. I think it's just the Irish who were sent over to Jamaica to be indentured servants who then stayed. So the Jamaican English accent has elements of Irish in it.
Yeah.
So I'm totally cool with that. Like, there's nothing in my mind that says that's wrong.
So the family of hobbits that he's supposed to come from in the Silmarillion are mentioned as being like darker skinned than normal, than other hobbits. Not normal, other hobbits.
Yeah.
Right. But in addition to that, anybody who doesn't know this, the Shire is based on Birmingham. It's where Tolkien's from. So, like, of course, him being a Black Brummie is probably the most accurate Hobbit we've ever gotten.
Yeah.
So that's what they're supposed to sound like. If you've got a problem with that, you're an idiot. Don't get me on my why it's okay there are black people in Lord of the Rings rant, because it's so okay, and I can't even do it.
See, I've got a very similar argument in that I don't really give a fuck about the lore of Lord of the Rings. I just don't care. Because to me, so I started reading The Hobbit for the first time. I've never read any of the Lord of the Rings books. I've never read any of the Tolkien books at all. I never had The Hobbit read to me as a child, which I understand is a rite of passage, but that just never happened. Like, no one in my family is interested in fantasy. So I never had it. But I finally got round to reading The Hobbit, and I'm like, this is fucking great. Like,
yeah.
And it's not the story as such, it's the way that the story is written. So Tolkien's language is so beautiful and so conversational and yet so eloquent and so high, and it's like I started listening to it on the audiobook, the one Andy Serkis was doing,
yeah.
and I stopped at like chapter 2 and went, the language in this is so good. I don't want to be distracted by how good Andy Serkis's performance of it is. So I'm going to go and get the book and just read the book to myself in my own head. And then have Andy Serkis read it to me, which I'm now probably going to go and do with Lord of the Rings as well. But my point about Lord of the Rings, and this is probably a very contentious opinion that basically only I hold. I have very complicated relationships with the Peter Jackson movies because I think the extended editions are fucking awful. But the theatrical editions might be one of the best stories ever told.
See, here's the thing. I'm like I was a big. So what happened? My story with Lord of the Rings is I read The Hobbit like bunch as a kid, and I started reading The Lord of the Rings when I was younger, and I got to the point where they are they're over their it's in the Fellowship. I think that it's either in the Fellowship or the one after. I don't know, can't remember. But it's that bit where they're trekking across the marches. The orcs have nicked 2 of the hobbits, and they've got this really long way to go.
Oh, is this when they're traipsing across that muddy ground with all the bodies in it that Tolkien said is definitely not based on Flanders?
No, this is a separate bit where they're just marching across. They're tracking down the orcs. They're trying to catch up with them. The orcs are out marching them. When I reached that point as a young man, that goes on for I'm going to say this, it goes on for about 10 pages too long. And I know that because after trying to read it, I gave up reading it. And then a few years later, I went back to it and I read about 3 more pages. And I went, oh, this is slog. And I gave up. And then they announced that the film was being made. And I went, oh, fucking hell. I've got to finish this now. And then I found out I only had 5 more pages to go. And then it got back to the action. I was furious. So it took me, in total reading time, I read The Lord of the Rings in about 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
In total, like, actual time, I took 7 years to read The Lord of the Rings.
That's how long the journey took. I think so. I have a very distinct memory from kind of my sort of late childhood. Right, I was maybe about 11 years old, and I was staying round at my friend's house. I think Lord of the Rings was just about to come out, and I remember saying to him, I was like, "What do you think of this Lord of the?" Because he was like the only dude I hung out with that I could talk about movies with, because other kids either pretended were too cool to talk about movies, or genuinely were too cool to talk about movies, and I was just severely uncool. But I remember talking to him about it. I was like, "What do you think of this Lord of the Rings stuff?" And he says, "Well, my dad's really excited because his dad was like, I can't remember what his trade was. I think he was a mechanic. But he was like, my dad does not read, like does not read. Like he can read, like he's not a fucking simpleton, but he just doesn't read. But when he was a kid, he read Lord of the Rings, and he would just read it over and over and over again." Because the language used to tell the story is so good. Now, the thing is, right, you cannot translate that to the screen. You cannot tell Lord of the Rings as a film in the way that it's told in the books. So Peter Jackson does an incredible job, and the reason I think the theatrical versions are better is because there's just more storytelling between all the bullshit and all the fucking lore and all the fucking this. And it's like, just give me interesting things that happen. And that's why I don't care about the lore of Lord of the Rings. I turned around to Laura and I said a statement that if I ever get crucified, this will be written on the crucifix, right? I said, here's why I like Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, because what the Lord of the Rings really needed was some good storytelling in it. Yeah, I know, right?
See,
and the way that they told that story in the show, regardless of the fact, who gives a fuck that Gandalf isn't supposed to show up for another 1,000 years? I don't care. He's here now, and they're telling that story very well.
The thing about Lord of the Rings is that you are right. Like, it's beautifully said. Also, I'd love to have I'd been in the room where Tolkien went into his publisher and went, "I've written a sequel to The Hobbit." Oh, another charming little kid's book. No. I've rewritten the folklore of the country I live in. Yeah. Here is a tome I have presented you. We'll have to break this into 3 pieces because there's a lack of paper exists because the war just finished.
Yeah. Has anyone? Listen, Mr. Publisher. Has anyone ever walked in here and said, "I have written the greatest story ever told in the history of humanity. You don't even have to read it. Just fucking put it out." Because you can do that. If you want.
And it's just dropping a massive book on the table, and then just having the people in the room go, "Is that the book?" He goes, "Oh no, sorry, these are my ancillary notes on the Dwarven language, which appears for like 4 chapters." The Lord of the Rings did like a lot of bad things for fantasy, because the problem is people don't get that, like, the reason that like your lore drops are bullshit unless it is part of the story. Unless the characters need to know the information that is given to drive them to achieve their goals, it is pointless. Tolkien's lore is dropped in because it's part of he's referencing that thing that everybody knows about in this world, because that's part of their backstory and it's an important part of their thing. It's like, for example, it's never mentioned that the Eomer, like the word. It's never mentioned it's never mentioned in the text that EO clearly is their word for horse.
Yeah.
And that is why it is in every name of every person and every town, because they are a horse. It's just there, and it makes it better as a result, because he wanted to tell a story, and then he'd casually go, "Oh, I've not established 2,000 years of backlore on why this sword is important. Fuck. Better go write all that."
It's why I think because I think it's somewhat similar to the argument that Star Wars has to be a fantasy because Star Trek isn't, and it's like, well, Star Trek is kind of as much of a fantasy as Star Trek, and they're still basically sci-fi. But
Yeah.
it's I don't know. Again, I haven't actually read the trilogy yet, but from what I have read, because I've tried it before, and what I've gone into in like YouTube videos where they analyze the text and things, I don't know if I agree with the assertion that The Hobbit was a book written for children and then he decided to write a book for adults. I don't think that's what he did. I think he wrote a book for children that was incredibly beautifully written, and then he decided, I'm going to expand on this, and I'm going to write essentially a book for kids that just doesn't speak down to kids and just trusts, as you say, the kids will figure out that EO is the word for horse. Like, because kids aren't idiots. I think that's what Lord of the Rings is. But maybe I'll have a different. Maybe I'll pop in a couple of weeks and I'll be like, man, I'm halfway through Fellowship and fuck me, I can't believe these books weren't rated 18 plus.
It's the thing with the Rings of Power is like, I've not seen it yet. I've not watched it, so this is me like talking as an outsider. I think it's very much a show being made for the people who Lord of the Rings is their Star Wars. Like the people who like, these are the classic movies, you've got to watch these are important, they grew up on that, and that's been like a part of their life, as Star Wars has been a part of mine.
I see what you mean. I wasn't sure you were going there.
Whereas I come to like the Lord of the Rings as the Lord of the Rings movies are nice, but I'm also a big fan of Ralph Bakshi's adaptation of the first movie, and I've read the books multiple times, and I've read the Silmarillion. I haven't. I got halfway through it and I gave up. It's poorly written. But it's a bunch of notes thrown together by Christopher Tolkien, who's not as good. Okay, it's that simple. So I've walked away. But it's I get like, but this is for them. This is like them when we got the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
But good, I assume. This is so it's like I will get around to watching it at some point, but it doesn't. I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, oh no, it's ruined. You cannot ruin Lord of the Rings.
No,
it is one of the greatest books ever written, and it will always be that forever. End of discussion. And also, it has black people in it. There are black people in Lord of the Rings. They're mentioned as being the darker-skinned men who ride the elephants, because, of course, they are. Tolkien knows where elephants come from, and the men who ride them, what colour their skin is. It's either Africa or India, and this is a creation myth. So they're going to be created. If they're not there, it's weird. Unless you're saying all people were created white, and then later they got corrupted and became black, which is so racist it hurts.
Take it from a Ghostbusters fan. No reboot ever ruins the original, right? Eventually we are going to get a Back to the Future remake, and what's going to be really hurtful is that the time that Martin McFly goes back to is going to be during our, probably past our, like, developing period. Like, they're going to go back to 2005. And do you know what? It doesn't fucking matter, because first of all, I mean, lots of people will probably go and see it, but it certainly won't be as good. But who cares? Back to the Future 1985 is still one of the most important stories, one of the most human stories ever told. Who fucking cares what they do? Like, not everything is made for you. Yeah, there's a lot of people who like Lord of the Rings and a lot of people who can't be fucked getting into all the lore, so they just want an interesting story told about those characters. Don't. This has become a very serious episode about a shit episode of Star Trek.
Well, the thing is, right, so I do have a theory about this, which is when the first like reboots and fucking around with like previously existing properties that was done was the Star Wars prequels, and to a lesser extent the special editions. And we all talked then about how our childhood had been ruined, but that's because the original versions of Star Wars weren't available. Like, they'd only just come out on like VHS. They were only like available for a short period to actually buy. And then the special editions came out, and George Lucas stopped releasing the classic versions. Like, if you want to get the classic Star Wars experience, you have to download illegally the despecialized versions. That's what George Lucas did.
Yeah.
So that's when we used to go, oh, he's ruined our childhood. somebody making something new with characters that previously exist doesn't ruin your childhood, because you could still just watch the original thing and not care about the new thing. There's I watched Man of Steel, and I've watched Batman versus Superman, and I still love Batman and Superman.
Yeah.
And those films are the visual equivalent of AIDS.
And also to go back to the original unfucking specialized Star Wars trilogy, if you're the type of person that thinks, you know, Disney's ever going to release the original editions of Star Wars, and you're like, you know what, I'll go on hunger strike until Disney releases the original editions of Star Wars, you might as well just drop a toaster in your bath right now, mate, and save yourself some time, because that is never, ever, ever going to happen. Because they're so... Disney are so intent on continuity that the original editions of Star Wars will quite possibly be out of continuity with the stuff that Disney has been producing. Speaking of which, have you seen Andor?
I haven't watched it yet. It's
the best Star Wars. It's so good.
I really liked the Rogue One, the movie, but I was sold, Mark. I was sold on a lie. I was told as a child that there was a trilogy of trilogies planned, and as a result, I went to see those all. I've seen every Star Wars film in the cinema at some point. I watched all of them, and my overall feeling at the end of the last Star Wars movie wasn't that it was a good movie, wasn't that it was a bad movie, it wasn't anything like that. It was just a sense of freedom that I had seen what I'd been told was going to happen. It was done, and I could walk away. And as a result, I'm even when somebody tells me something's good with Star Wars, like The Mandalorian Season 1, I'm very hesitant to dip my toe back in case they just get their claws back in, and I have to suddenly care about Star Wars again and watch some shit movies.
See, just while we're doing this entire episode about my garbage opinions about films, I have gone on many records as say, and this, I can't believe this opinion about Star Wars is going to turn people off of our Star Trek podcast. Personally, I think The Last Jedi is the best Star Wars film since Empire. So I quite like the sequel stuff. And I think a lot of people I've read online, which you can't take as a general opinion, right? People online are clowns. But
yeah,
a lot of people are like, well, we're really sick of, like, we really understand the fucking the period between 3 and 4. Can we start exploring after 6? It's like, I don't give a shit about what happens after 6. Like, Andor is about the birth of the rebellion. It's not about him. It's the kind of starts off as like an origin story for him, but they drop that pretty quickly, and it just becomes about what the rebellion is, which is like boots on the ground rebellion is what I want from Star Wars. Rogue One I don't love, because I feel like it's two movies that have been sellotaped together. I feel like Gareth Edwards made a really good movie and then they kind of ruined it. Or maybe he didn't and Tony Gilroy saved it. Either way, someone made a shit half of a film.
I do love the one really good joke I once saw. I can't remember where it was about why Vader doesn't go down to the planet to stop them from stealing it. Well, they're on the beach.
Okay, sand. But yeah, just shit like the start of Rogue One when he's talking to Danny Mays, who you're like, that's a recognisable guy. He's going to be in this for a while. Oh no, he's dead. Because Cassian Andor killed him. Because yeah, sometimes the rebels are going to have to do some wet work. So I want to see a movie about the wet work that the rebels do. Oh no, let's bring in a blind Jedi and his pal. Why? So Andor is like if Rogue One didn't have any nonsense in it.
Yeah, I'm up for. I'd be up for that because some of my favourite stuff. The thing is that like I understand like progressing the time period and all that, but some of the most interesting stuff in Star Wars was like did you ever play Dark Forces and then Jedi Knight?
No.
So yeah, Dark Forces was the first person shooter they made of Star Wars that includes. let's see. So it starts off. The first one is just a first-person shooter, but it is one of the levels is you are the person who steals the Death Star plans. And it's stuff like that. The second one is you're the same character who was in Dark Forces, but now you're going to be trained to become a Jedi. And it's fucking fantastic because it has a light side and a dark side skill tree.
Yeah.
Depending on which one you want to put points into, you could either block laser fights, or you could literally get the little training droid thing, and you spar with that. And if you just left your guy in a room with that running for 8 hours, he just got better at blocking lasers. So that later on in the game, you could just be fending off people who've got a machine gun.
Yeah, I might give it a shot. I'm not taking that as canon because I do think the story of Rogue One is really good because blowing up the Death Star is the single most important event in the Star Wars universe. That's why, if you watch Star Wars, what they've started doing, they do it in Andor, is they give you a time period, but the period is always BBY or ABY, which is before or after the Battle of Yavin, because, again, blowing up the Death Star is the most important thing the Rebels ever do. Any character in Star Wars ever does, the most important thing is blowing up that Death Star because it turns the tide. So the fact that we are told about these people in the opening crawl is that's cool on one level, but I'd quite like to see that, and I think Rogue One just disappointed me on that. But Andor is doing something similar. They haven't finished the season. It's quite cool what they do. I'm not going to spoil it, right? So Andor is about a heist, but there's 12 episodes, and in episode 6, the heist happens, and then the next 6 episodes are going to be the fallout from the heist, which is a really interesting way to tackle that story.
And that's interesting. I do like that sound of that. I could watch. I'm probably going to watch it. I'm not going to watch Kenobi.
No.
Because I don't want to. Apparently Marvel is sending a bunch of projects back into that we're going to be series of being pushed back into being films, and I think that's probably a result of them seeing Kenobi and being so if you wanted to write a film, we should write a film rather than spread the story over 6 or 8 episodes or whatever. But
yeah. Well, if you listen to this entire episode and you're disappointed that we spent this episode talking about different things, then congratulations, you know what Shades of Grey was like.
Yeah, we probably spoke about Star Trek for as much time as there was new Star Trek content in the episode to talk about. What I would say is we're moving into season 3.
Yeah.
But so actually, no.
This is we'll start. If this was the National League, we're moving into the Championship.
Hey, let me ask you a question, though. Right? Given what given what Disney has done, reference. I dig that. But if
I'm into football now. I support Wrexham and Liverpool. I'm not a bandwagon guy. I don't just support football teams because they make interesting documentaries about them.
Okay, so genuine question. Right, if it were to make a series like Andor, but for Star Trek, what character or what time period or what thing do you focus on?
Ooh. I don't know. I'd do a series set on either a colony or a ship that was involved in the Cardassian War. Yeah.
That is apparently happened pre-TNG. Or I'd do a series set on I'd love to see a Star Trek series that's on board a Klingon ship.
I'd quite like maybe to see... I think what could be interesting if you did it is maybe a mini-series would be essentially... So obviously Star Trek 09 is the movie they would make about Kirk's life in the universe of Star Trek to make him seem more exciting. So I think what might be interesting... He's
already very exciting.
Yeah, is a series where a series of events happen where basically a lower decker ensign is promoted to captain, just through, and not like a comedy, just through like a series of a fucking Rube Goldberg machine of plot, means that they end up in charge. They end up being the most senior officer on a ship, and they have to take over because they can't reach Starfleet. So essentially, someone who knows fucking nothing, because the entire bridge crew and all the officers get vaporized. So the only thing you have is the lower deckers who were out on vacation at the time. They come back to the ship and they're like, we can't reach Starfleet, and something's coming, and we have to figure out how to be captains.
I would love like engineering to be like, okay, we've got this, and this, and the guy who knows how these things work is dead, and we have no idea. So we're going to be looking through manuals.
I also thought of a joke last night when I was high, which was O'Brien and Julian Bashir sitting in Quark's bar, and Julian Bashir turning around to come to Chief O'Brien and saying, "What would you rather have? A button that brings about universal peace, or a pill that gives you a 5-inch longer dick?" And Miles O'Brien turn around and say, "Julian, what would I do with a 17-inch dick?"
Right, yeah, so thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.